Welcome to Scrappy to Scalable, the podcast where we explore human centered AI designed to level the playing field, empowering small and mid sized businesses to compete with the giants.
Hi, everybody. If you are thinking about starting an e-commerce business, you definitely want to check out this podcast. Hi, my name is Philippe Crook with Caldor Dynamics, and today's guest is Shawn Khorrami. He's a serial entrepreneur and founder of ePlaybooks, a company that helps small and mid-sized consumer brands grow across Amazon, Walmart, Shopify, TikTok, and other major sales channels. Shawn has built and scaled more than a dozen businesses from the ground up, combining his background in mathematics, computer science, economics, and law with decades of hands-on experience in operations, marketing, and finance. He's also the author of 3 books, including The Small Business Guide to Surviving a Post-Pandemic World and The Business is the Product, each packed with actionable items for building resilient, scalable companies. Shawn, I am really excited to chat with you today. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Philippe.
How are you today?
Fantastic. It's a great day. It's actually raining outside, by the way, or about to rain outside. It looks like it.
I know. I'm really hesitant to talk about weather to anybody because we're like, oh my gosh, it's 60 degrees in California. It's freezing.
That's exactly what I
We're
did.
we're so spoiled being a fellow Angelino.
Yeah.
I'm really excited to chat with you today because you have a very diverse background and you've scaled a lot of companies. I wanted to get into a sense of what started that entrepreneurial spirit in you.
Well, I mean, it's almost all I knew. My dad, from as long as I have memories, my dad had his own construction company. We're immigrants from Iran, so that's where he started his company. So for as long as I knew, as long as I dealt with my dad, it was whatever his business was and what he was running. And from a very small age, he would take me, probably something that's not great to do with kids these days, but back then it was okay, I guess, to construction sites where I would climb all over construction equipment. And from that point, I mean, think about 5, 6, 7-year-old kid. All I thought about was actually having my own construction company, which funny enough, I never did.
What got you into the business side of entrepreneur? So how you started out seeing your dad in construction.
Yeah.
What was the first journey for you to get into becoming an entrepreneur?
When I first actually did that, it was quite by accident. It was, again, involves my dad, but I was really just trying to help my dad. Having moved over here, you got to think about this, 40-some-year-old guy having to deal with an entirely new economy, an entirely new culture, and all of those things. My dad struggled quite a bit to sort of revive his business. And again, he didn't go start working, get a job somewhere. He started his own business. And one of the things he did was he got his hands, and he struggled a lot. So he got his hands on a couple of small apartment buildings, and he was having trouble managing them. And, what I thought was, okay, how do I help my dad? I started back then, I'm kind of dating myself. Back then, personal computers were just getting into homes. I got a personal computer and put together this sort of software, this database program that helped manage apartment buildings. And that was really what I started with, is this management program that I came up with.
That's pretty amazing. So you started there and now you have a company called ePlaybooks. Tell us a little bit about what ePlaybooks does and how you help clients scale and grow.
So my businesses in general, altogether, they either came out of some need that I saw that I sort of stumbled upon, or some challenge that I saw. And I have, examples of both. But what ended up happening was, as I had some businesses that were more public than others, not everything that a resounding success, plenty of failures along the way. What would happen is people would come to me asking for help, always in a time of crisis. Either something terrible had happened or something great had happened, and they'd say, help me fix this. So out of that grew this mentorship program that I had, essentially. That's what I refer to it as. And I also have, as I talk to more and more of these businesses that would come to me, not only do I get more business ventures, but I also develop this system, buckets of problems that they would have. So after a while, I thought, love doing this. I want to get into working on more businesses. I want to leverage the expertise that people have picked up in running those small businesses that they have and really develop some robust relationships in that. I said, okay, I'm going to form a company, ePlaybooks, and start working with people on one bucket. I had three. One bucket of challenges that I had, and I picked sales channels being the bucket. I think I described to you off camera, the three reasons I picked sales channels as one of my buckets. And so what we do, I said, okay, so we're going to pick sales channels. We're going to work with different small businesses in a single sales channel, and then grow the relationship from there. That was the entire thought process behind ePlaybooks.
Now, your sales channel, you're talking specifically like an Amazon or a Walmart or a TikTok.
Correct. So I picked, again, narrowing things a little bit more. I picked e-commerce. And so once you do that, then you go, okay, well, sales channels, what is there? And you kind of put together the picture from there. Now, one of the reasons I picked sales channels was the largely shifting landscape that's there that I saw. And so you have kind of a proliferating grouping of these places where you can conduct commerce online, all of them different, with different audiences, with different approaches, and increasingly more complex as they develop more business tools and more businesses get on there and start competing.
So let's say I have a product. I've created a product. If I want to start selling that, what do you think is the first step of the process for somebody who has a product who wants to start selling it on those social channels?
Okay, so assuming you've developed a product and you have an inventory is what I'm thinking. So you've at this point formed a company, you have a trademark, and you want to promote a brand. And this is your catalog, a product or a number of products. The thing to sort of think through is exactly where you are now and where you want to be, short term, medium term, long term. The other is kind of analyzing your product and figuring out exactly where you're going to find your customers for that product. Now, my company, we end up, in ePlaybooks working on Amazon a whole lot, because I always tell people this, just because of the sheer market size in the US, even if you're going to rule out Amazon, you at least have to consider it in deciding whether that's a place or the place that you're going to start selling products. Really understanding exactly, what problem your product is solving, and where those people are that need that resolution to begin with is incredibly important.
Why would somebody discount or not want to be on Amazon?
Depending on exactly what they're selling. So sometimes, you'll find people that, for example, are creating things that are relatively small batch. They're not, a lot of times, not interested in scaling, which probably would not be something that fits something I would do, because that's not what I'm in the business that I am for. But in those situations, they may not want to be on Amazon. Other times they may have a cost structure that's problematic. So they have procured some goods, and for example, their COGS are, relative to what they can retail the price of the product for, would not allow the kinds of costs that are involved in running an Amazon business. There are situations where, for example, a social media channel may work better for them. This would be situations where maybe some fashion brands may want to, take advantage of some of the things that are available to them in other places than Amazon. There's also what I've noticed, and I don't necessarily agree with this, is Amazon seems to have a little bit of a stigma, and it's eroding, but it's still there. As if I put my product on there, it means I have a substandard product or a cheap product, or not the fancy, stylish product that you would expect. So in those situations, people choose not to do that. I don't necessarily agree with that decision.
So when you're advising a client, or if they're on their own, how do you do that market research? Like, where do you go to find out, okay, is this product appropriate for Amazon? Is it more appropriate for socials? How do you do the baseline research to figure out the best place to put your product?
Number one, we have teams of people that specialize in the various sales channels. So, at this point, what we have is we have a system for figuring out exactly what a given product how they would do. We do market research on on various sales channels. But like I said, it's not like we sit there and we just spray out and say, oh, okay, let's check out every single sales channel we can think of and then figure out if the product fits. At this point, we have the expertise to know when you're handing me something, where will it do best? And I'll have some hunch as to that, or my leadership team will definitely have some hunch as to that. What do we think about this? What do we think about that? And then go into those areas and actually do some research in terms of seeing what kind of reception we will have from the market and what exactly will cost us to actually market. A lot of times what I'll hear from different business owners is, I want to really grow organically and things like that. And I kind of find that to
That's
be a
cute,
little bit
right?
of a fiction these days. Yes, there's organic reach. There certainly is, but marketplaces have figured out where their bread is buttered, number one. Number two, they have now gotten to a place, they have matured enough where investors are expecting serious returns out of them. So they're under a great deal of pressure to produce and continue to increase revenues, profits, different metrics. They're no longer at the age where they were given a lot of leash for various other reasons. So it's a lot more difficult to have organic reach in the way that a lot of people think about it. So the marketing budget, exactly what you would have to spend, what we would get in return, what kind of traction we would have. We actually go through and do an analysis of that and spit that out. And start working with the business on it.
Have you ever been surprised about a product going on to a specific sales channel? You're like, I didn't think that would sell there, and it actually did.
So, this is something that comes up. You mentioned one of my books, and I go through all of these different things and examples of how various rules that I have work. Look, you'll find all kinds of business publications where same thing, this rule and that rule, and do it this way and do it the other way. There are always exceptions in the world, always. And so whatever rule you have, you'll have something that violates it that did phenomenally well, and you have something that will follow it that did phenomenally awful. There are no guarantees in the world because even if you apply every and the best rules you can, you will always, there are other factors at play that are completely outside of your control, no matter how good you are. And so, that happens. Yes, absolutely. There are things that you sit there and go, oh, don't do that. That's a mistake. And then, okay, I guess that works. Absolutely, for sure.
Yeah, there's always those one surprises. You're like, well, let's try this. We'll see if it works. And it does. You're like, whoa, it's a nice, happy accident, right?
And I have actually, one thing that comes to mind is a recent example where I recommended to a partner of mine, hey, this would be a grand mistake if we did X. And they want really, really, there was a lot of push to do X. And finally, I sort of relented just because of various things. And so, we did it and it went exactly the opposite of what I said. I mean, I complete egg on my face. But I told him, I said, you know what? I'd rather have egg on my face than to be right in this one. Because if I were right, we would have had all kinds of issues. And I'm glad I'm wrong because it worked phenomenally well. Go figure.
And sometimes they have that magic sauce. You just don't know. You're like, oh, okay, maybe this is a happy accident.
But you know what? The other thing is, I always caution people, don't make the mistake of grabbing at those things and saying, okay, you know what? It worked for this person, therefore it's going to work for me. Because just because it worked once doesn't mean it's going to repeat. But even if it means it's going to repeat, it doesn't mean you're putting yourself in the best position to do that. And I think in business, what you're trying to do is really put yourself in the best position for success. Right. And so that's what I always say. Like, okay, yeah, there's a 1/1,000,000th of a percent chance that it'll work this way, and there's a 10% chance that it'll work the other way. I understand that you've seen it work one way. I wouldn't just trust it.
I think that's the hardest part when you're a business owner or a founder. You have this vision because you're like, well, they did it once. And sometimes you hold on to that without actually looking at the data, without actually looking at the numbers, without actually doing the research of what it's going to require to get to that point. I think a lot of people miss that step and they just in the dreamland stage of their product.
True, and I agree with that. Here's the other thing a lot of times we all miss is the changing of times. So, somebody will come to me and say, I want to use Instagram to push, whatever. And well, why do you want to do that? Well, my friend did the exact same business in 2000 on Instagram and it just went like fire. Okay. And that's assuming the Instagram of 2012 is the same as Instagram of 2025. And that's a very, very big mistake you're making because it's not. It's very different.
That's
Uh,
a really good,
it,
really
it, it's that shifting landscape that I mentioned. What got me into actually using this as the place where I started working with businesses in ePlaybooks, right, was that shifting landscape of these sales channels. And then, a lot of times what I notice is that is not something that businesses take into account when they consider where to go and how to go about it when they're there.
Well, yeah, it makes a lot of sense because you just think about social media and the algorithms, right? Things change every couple months, and then you have to retool your ads, you have to retool your marketing, your content, because now the algorithm has shifted to something else, and something else is new and shiny. And then a new social media platform comes up, like TikTok, and then that takes over, and then Reels, and then Shorts, and things change so often. And if you're not in the pulse of that change, you will be planning and doing the strategy for a platform that was 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah. And 4 or 5 years is a very long time. And, other things change. Business priorities change for those very same social media platforms. It makes them act differently vis-a-vis their users. Politics of the world affect that. Wherever you are on the political spectrum, it doesn't matter how it affects what exactly, gets pushed this way or the other way. That changes. The culture changes. People's tastes change. All of these things move along and instead of relying on some story that you heard about some business that did well because of X, Y, and Z, you may find yourself in a very disappointing situation.
We have a client that we're working with right now who is in product regulations and compliance. And she keeps talking to us about how many new regulations keep coming up, new state regulations, new federal regulations, in terms of so many things that are related to products. How do you keep up with that on the e-commerce side? I know that Amazon has very, very strict rules about their product safety compliance. How do you keep up with all of those regulations, and how do you advise somebody who, let's say, I want to get onto Amazon. I've decided Amazon is a good platform for me. How do you make sure that their products are in compliance with all of their rules and restrictions?
There's a lot of challenges. One, you're absolutely right. And this is true of a lot of sales channels. They are increasingly more stringent and increasingly have more requirements. And it's not just, for example, them following the rules and the laws. It's also things that they develop internally for a variety of reasons, various protocols, various things that they allow, various things that they don't allow. Those things change. There's also a lot of those changes, as you pointed out. And a lot of times when they announce them, it's still vague, to follow. Do you mean X or do you mean Y? And there's vagueness in that. One is actually working on the platform day to day and having teams that actually spend all of their time doing exactly that. As much as these platforms say, "Oh yeah, we'll just get you get on there and do it yourself." Increasingly, they're not just because the tools that they have are more and more complex, not just because they're put together in a quilt patch. I always say this, it's like a quilt patch because they keep adding and adding and adding. It's not necessarily just this one system that's put together and fits all well together, but also because of these rules that they keep changing. Oh, this one is good. This claim is okay. This one is not. And then how those get interpreted, a lot of times people mention algorithms. Yes, you may get flagged by an algorithm, and those algorithms can be very, very frustrating because they may flag completely irrelevant products from time to time. But also, when they get evaluated, they go to human beings, and those human beings are given criteria that they may apply not exactly the same way, person to person to person. The way you get a product actually on the market, especially when they're in some of those sensitive areas, where you're dealing with FDA regulations or you're dealing with potentially medical implications, wellness, things like that, is kind of, I look at it as threading the needle. And you'll have, anyone who's done this will give you all kinds of stories of exactly, you'll have two identical products and one will get flagged, one won't get flagged. Or both will get flagged and you'll get two different solutions, completely inconsistent with each other. It's that experience of being on there, one, having your ear to the ground so you understand everything that's coming out as it's coming out. And then two, having the experience, because like I said, ultimately you may be dealing with a human being on the other side and they may go in different directions, but almost knowing what the right solution is and helping and massaging it till you get to the right solution with whichever department you're working with.
That's going to be so frustrating as a business owner. You're like, this product is the exact same and it didn't get flagged. Why is mine getting flagged? That's got to be infuriating.
All day long. It's something that we handle on a daily basis. Literally today, we have teams out in Europe, so I start hearing about this stuff, I'll call it, from very, very early on in the morning. Sometime from midnight, these things start and they go all through the day. But just today, multiple different products going across different brands that we deal with that are going through the same thing. Some of them that happened from a week ago, some of them that just happened. How do we fix it? How do we do this? How do we do that? Yeah, it can be quite challenging.
So you also talk a lot about logistics being compared to the back end of the war effort.
I talk a lot, that's for sure. So, okay, you're focusing me on logistics. Okay.
Tell me a little bit about operational or logistic blind spots that really hurt e-commerce businesses the most.
I think, again, I told you off camera, one of the reasons I pick sales channels as the place I start is one of my other buckets of those three buckets that I mentioned, is logistics, which quite figuratively and literally is the back end of a business. In my book, I talk about it. I picked a quote from General Eisenhower from years back. He said, "Wars and campaigns are largely won and lost on logistics alone." Businesses are the same way. It's an incredibly important part of the business. And if you look at, particularly post-pandemic, by the way, logistics issues became kind of front page business news, or they became more into the forefront than they were before. But you hear it all the time where big companies—
Yeah, it makes sense because everyone was home. They weren't doing anything. I ordered about 17 puzzles from Amazon.
Yeah.
So it became a very real, and my sourdough starter kit,
Oh, there we go. Okay.
That's what everyone did during the pandemic.
You're one of those.
So,
All right.
yeah. Yeah. So that's what I did basically during the pandemic. I did puzzles and I started sourdough bread.
Yeah. Logistics became a big issue. Those shutdowns really, really showed what can happen with when you have major disruptions in something that you initially think has nothing to do with it, and suddenly you go, "Well, wait a minute. Where do I get this stuff from? Where do they come from? How do they reach me?" Those started becoming, kind of front page news, right? It's gone a little bit more into the backgrounds, in the years since then, but it's still something that people became aware of. A lot of businesses, they come and they say, "Okay, well, yeah, I want to sell, I want to make revenues, I want to do this, I want to do the other." And I'm happy to comply and start working that way. But I always mention that, logistics, your supply chains, your sourcing, I kind of put those together when I'm talking to a small business, because a lot of times, they're one, very linked, but also with a small business, they're particularly linked. Just the sourcing, where are you getting your products from? How are they reaching you? How long will it take to replenish inventory? A lot of these things are things that people, they may be even aware of, but as they start selling, they're not keeping in the back of their heads. It's not something that's forefront. What happens when how do we avoid stocking out? Where do we get this stuff? How does the profit model work? And they immediately say, "Well, the goods cost me X. They cost me whatever, this amount of money. And then they manage to maneuver within everything else, but they look at the cost of goods as something that's just constant. It's not constant. There's lots of ways of procuring things. There's lots of things you can do to your product. And again, big companies do this all the time. But one blind spot that I see is they come to you and they say, here, and this product cost me X, and now make it profitable. And so, one of the things that we do once we start working, we kind of go back and say, okay, let's look at your product. Let's look at what we have over here. Let's look at what you have around it. I'm not a believer in selling just one product. I'm a believer in developing a catalog. And so let's see what you have all around it, and then see how we work toward something that can be profitable and viable.
When you say it like that, it sounds like people should talk to you before they even have a product ready to go. Do you meet with people that have an idea from like ideation to actual
Yeah.
production, or are you more in the post production stage?
Well, I don't like to be too much in development because, you pick where you want to enter a situation, right? Where you want to enter a business. And kind of what I thought when I conceived of this business was start working with people that have developed some expertise in a given product. Having said that, it happens all the time that we get involved with something in the development stage. And you'd be surprised at how I, even in that situation, get to the goal. So it could be a situation where someone is a manufacturer of something. They're making either a major component or the entirety of a product that's being white labeled and being sold out. In that situation, developing exactly what product we would retail directly rather than what they're wholesaling or they're having white labeled, and then developing packaging, putting things around that, and looking at exactly how you launch, and putting together a launch plan and all that stuff. But yeah, so that happens where we've gotten involved with products a year before they even launched.
Wow,
Yeah,
that must be kind of cool.
to pick and choose. The unfortunate thing is I got into this sort of because of I love doing this thing, and then sometimes I'm not as focused as I'd like to be. So I get started at different places.
Well, I'm sure it can pull you in a million different places with different products, different industries, different sales channels. Like you must be going in a million different directions.
And I'll say something that at this point may be cliche to a lot of people, but I have an absolutely fantastic team. So they're my arms, legs, and brain. And, we work very closely. A lot of the people that work with me have worked with me for a number of years, 20 years, 10 years. I trust them hugely. I lean on them greatly. And as we bring in more team members, we work very closely in order to have that.
Let's go back to a founder that has a product out there, but they really want to grow. What is your method, or what is the way that you evaluate how they grow, and what would you recommend for that founder?
So I evaluate how their position themselves. What exactly do they look like right now? And then I look at what exactly the demand is on the market for what seems like the places to go and actually get sales. And then, and different businesses have different things. A lot of things are like when you get a product that's a one and done. You're selling a pot, right? I consider that a one and done, even though eventually that person will go buy another pot. But that's a one and done. There are businesses where you're dealing with consumables, so supplements, food items, things like that. I use, like, for example, supplements as an example of a business that relies specifically on a return business. And you have to sort of look at exactly where the demand is for the particular product line that you have, what you're looking at as in terms of an expected lifetime value for the customer, and put together a marketing plan, which is largely, hugely dependent on what the budget of the business is. So I always look at exactly what they have thought through in terms of budgeting for the marketing plan, and then put together something and see if that makes sense initially, just without actually testing it, and then go from there.
It sounds like, I mean, you mentioned this a couple times about the marketing budget. It sounds like that is one of the critical parts of growing your e-commerce business. Are you seeing any trends in the marketing side of the e-commerce industry that you would stay away from or recommend, or just general trends in the marketing of these products?
Again, I'm not going to say anything revolutionary here, but I mean, AI has opened the door to a lot more capabilities for small businesses where you can get some like imagery done, things like that at very low cost. Quality is still iffy. You have to be
Yeah.
careful exactly what you're doing with it. Don't get too fancy with it. Put together some stuff that look good, that makes sense. That's incredibly important. Imagery altogether, if anything, has become more critical because there are more capabilities in terms of creating different digital assets. It's more and more important to do so. Ultimately, if you're looking online, what the customer is looking at something is that they're not touching, that they're not testing, that they're not seeing physically in place. And so part of your challenge, in my opinion, is giving them as much a real world experience with your product as humanly possible. Not just because it helps them actually say, oh yeah, I want this product. It looks good to me, right? It does a number of things. It creates trust that that product will do the things that they wanted to do. This is something that a lot of times people kind of overlook or avoid. I want to give the customer everything that they would be thinking and answering all their questions, including the weakness of my product. Because here's what's going to happen. If they get that product and then they take it in and then it has this weakness that they were looking for, that they were trying to avoid, one, they're going to return the product. Two, they're going to be dissatisfied. None of those things are good news for you as a business. You don't want the return, and you definitely don't want them dissatisfied to put a bad review about your product. Upfront, dealing with those concerns and maybe losing some customers that would initially buy the product is definitely the smart thing to do. And all of those things are parts of giving the customer the experience of actually testing out the product without actually testing out the product. So when you're looking at marketing, I always say it's incredibly important to use a lot of different digital assets, use all the tools that are in your quiver, including, for example, creating infographics, creating videos, using anything and everything, YouTube videos, whatever you can in order to assure you're giving them the full experience of the product as much upfront as humanly possible. And that's something that's out there, and the capabilities are increasing, particularly for small businesses.
Yeah, I find it like you're talking my language now. So like I'm the marketing side of Caldor Dynamics. There's a couple things that you said that really is like, that's interesting. I wouldn't expect you to say, put up front your weaknesses. That seems very counterintuitive, but it makes a lot of sense in terms of you don't want returns, you don't want bad reviews. So if a product doesn't scramble your eggs, say, hey, this doesn't scramble eggs, but it makes nice bacon or whatever. In your marketing, are you also doing like, I guess it depends on the product, but are you also doing like lifestyle videos or like, if you buy this product, this is what your life will be like kind of marketing? Or is it strictly like, here's what the product looks like, here's how I open it, here's how I use it? Are more functional or more like aspirational kind of marketing for your
I
products?
think it rarely includes situations where you don't use lifestyle. Most times you want to have imagery with, lifestyle imagery, because it just helps the consumer see what it would look like. I mean, you see it all over the place. Even if you want to buy a house, they stage the house, right? That's the way you sell a house. It's the same way you do it with a product. Show them what it would look like if they were using it. Show them what it would be in their backyard, in their living room. Show them the things that it would help them do and how it would look. So the more they see those, the more they can imagine those, the better it is. And by the way, like with furniture and with various things, you've seen now where they have programs where you can actually place this thing inside of my own living room. And, because being able to see it is incredibly important. Funny thing is, I was just reading something kind of a little bit irrelevant, but there are certain people that can't actually picture something in their minds. I didn't know what degrees of
100%.
ability people had. I knew people had different levels of ability of doing that, but some people just can't do it at all, apparently.
From my experience, like I was a real estate agent for 22 years. So a lot of my marketing is all about like, imagine this. But I would try to sell a house and people would walk in. I literally had buyers that I was showing properties to, and they'd say, "Oh, I love the house, but the walls are purple." And I was like, "What are you talking about? Paint it. Like, you
Right.
can't see that if you paint it, it's going to be the same house that you love, but with different color walls." Like, honestly, they cannot see that. So I
Yeah.
think what you're saying is exactly right. You need to show them everything.
Not only is that sometimes people don't see those things, is that, sometimes they're not there thinking, the ideas aren't coming to them. Giving them
Hmm.
ideas is always crucial. They may be thinking it, they may not be thinking it. And so suddenly they go, "Oh, this," they have an aha moment. "Oh, I can do that. Oh, I see." Sometimes they may just not even have the expertise to say, "Oh yeah, you can remove a wall like this. It'll take, very low budget to do this and the other." They just may not know that's even a possibility in the world.
Hmm.
And then the other thing is, you stick someone inside of some place where they're not an expert and you're an expert. So in that situation where you're a real estate agent, you were an expert at this. They are maybe not an expert at, what to envisioning what can happen in a house. You've seen 1,000 houses, they've seen two, maybe. I mean, I'm just, throwing it out there. And so you may have other ideas of what can happen where they just don't even have the expertise to, have those ideas. So giving people that kind of perspective around your product is incredibly important. I literally go through this with different businesses, because they'll come to me and say, "Oh, I have this thing. I have a patent. It's the greatest thing in the world." It's like, well, yeah, it is. I mean, obviously, the patent office thought it was unique enough to give you a patent. That we agree on. And they immediately think that's the end of it. Now I just need people to see this thing, and then it's over, and I'm in Tahiti on the beach watching profits. People do think that, right? I mean, so you have to sort of bring them back and say, "Listen, with this product, you're solving a problem for the consumer. The consumer doesn't care about your product. They care about the problem they're having. And you're fixing a problem. But believe me, virtually every problem is going to have multiple solutions. And there are very smart people out there in the world, and they will go figure out other solutions that don't even touch your patent. Completely different solutions to solve the very same problem. Those are people that aren't even going to fight you on your patent. And then there are those people that may say, "Oh, you have a really good situation going over there. I'm going to come in and try to nibble at the sides of it." You have to envision what exactly all the different problems you're solving for consumers, and actually tell them that, because they may also not know all the problems your product solves. So the more of those you put out and they say, "Yeah, hey, it solves this problem, it solves that problem, it solves the other problem. By the way, you don't have to think about X." And people go, "Wait, I didn't know that that was out there." So you have to be very good at identifying all the problems your product solves and make sure that the consumer understands that, and conveying that message inside of different sales channels can be challenging. By the way, we talked, somewhat about Amazon, but you know, what you can message out inside of an Amazon is much different. And by the way, it's not just Amazon's rules, it's the consumer's rules. What mental space are they in when they come to Amazon? Do they want to listen to your entire presentation of X, Y, and Z and all this stuff? Maybe they do, maybe they don't. But most probably they don't. They've decided that I'm going to get a certain solution and I'm going to go, and they're much, much different as a shopper. So is it that you want to be conveying all these sort of all this messaging through other channels, and then having some sort of a thing where you start feeding people into different places? That's probably what you're doing, because the consumer, like I said, has their own rules. They may not have the ear to listen to the entire message you have to say on Amazon when they are on Amazon. They may have a lot more patience for your message if they're sitting on Facebook. And so all of those things you have to think through. And sorry, I'm glossing over a lot of different things just because of our time limitations. But yeah, you have to think through a lot of those things.
No, I think it's a fantastic point, because it must be really challenging, or maybe it's not challenging. Is it challenging to find out buyer purchasing habits? And like, I found it on here, I did the research on here, and then I bought it on there.
Yeah.
Is that
Yeah,
hard
people
to
do it all
do?
the time. They may do Google searches to find out about a product, and then when it comes to pulling the trigger on it, go right on Amazon and not even do any Google search for anybody, and do their entire search for the type of product they want on Amazon. All of those things happen. They may hear about a product, here, we'll go really old school. They may hear about it on the radio. You flash your URL, right? You go to blah, blah, blah.com, blah, blah, blah.com, blah, 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 and say it over and over and over. And guess what? Where most of your purchases will come from, suddenly Amazon. They're at your Amazon store and purchasing over there. You'll get mentioned on the Today Show. They have those products and they'll put you up. The Today Show. Oh yeah, look, we have this. And they'll actually put a thing on there. Here's the website and all this stuff. And they have their own little shop that they'll push you into. Go to the Today Show shop, or, a lot of these programs have that. And then, you suddenly get a whole lot of those people going to Amazon and making a purchase. That's where you catch them, and this, by the way, is an age-old thing. This is nothing new about today's sales channels. This would happen in a number of years ago. Sort of you market, there's whatever direct response comes in. And then how do you capture all this other stuff on the sides, right? And so you have to be very good at doing that, or, your marketing is not going to be as efficient. So we work very, very, very hard to accomplish.
One last question. AI is fundamentally changing business, the world, and I think we're at the infancy of it. How would you recommend a founder, or what's the best piece of advice that you would give a founder to future-proof their business with an AI-driven world?
The way I look at it is, at least I don't view myself as an AI expert, which means that I sort of have to rely on what's there today and how to use it, and then what's going to be there tomorrow. Future-proofing against AI, technology like that for us is extremely difficult. There's things that that are happening today. There are things that that'll happen in the short term, tomorrow. And there's just those unknowns. You just have to keep yourself incredibly educated on an emerging technology like that may threaten your business, and then be understanding that you're going to have to adapt. This would happen with AI. This would happen with anything else. You don't run the same businesses today that you did before. Some of the concepts may be the same. I always say, you're not reinventing the world all the time, but the way you go about it may change. And if you're not there, you're going to be left out in the cold. We've seen that happen many times over the past 20 years. And we saw it happen the 20 years before that. So those things are going to continue to happen. You have to be real close to the ground. One of the things I'll tell you, I had a relative that had a printing business years ago. They would print business cards, all these different things. People would have letterheads printed, right? So they went out of business. But the reason they went out of business, wasn't that printing went out of business. It was that the way they did it went out of business. There are literally today lots of businesses that are out there that'll print business cards for you, that'll print all these things, and they're big businesses. And so, adapting to the technology that's coming is incredibly important, is probably more important than the type of business you're running, in my opinion. I see more examples of those kinds of things where a traditional business manages to survive in spite, or maybe because of, new technology, where so many of them go out of business because people said, well, this thing's not going to be necessary anymore.
Mm-hmm.
In some forms, it was not necessary. In other forms, it became necessary. And then they themselves innovated and came up with other products, other offerings that match the times. It's the patent I talked to you about. They come with the patent. Okay, I'm done. It's over. It's just, no. This is just the start. You have something, you have a hook. You can get into the market now. Now you got to keep innovating. Keep doing things, put products around there and keep pushing, now's the time to keep pushing. So a lot of times that's the advice I give is you got to keep going. You got to keep innovating and keep your ear to the ground and keep, keep moving your business forward.
That's a great advice. Well, Shawn, I really appreciate your time and your conversation. If somebody wants to work with you and ePlaybooks, how would they get a hold of you?
Just go to ePlaybooks.com. And because my last name is tough years ago, I registered connectwithshawn.com. But I think that now has been redirected to ePlaybooks, to tell you the truth.
Okay. So ePlaybooks.com.
Yeah, ePlaybooks.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for your time, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
You as well. Thank you.